When I was in high school, one of my youth pastors at the church that I was going to at the time had a great idea. He thought it would be awesome if we could use our full size indoor basketball court and open it up for kids in the community to come and play pickup basketball. Uh, and so on Friday nights, we started offering this to the community. And pretty soon it became very popular. Some nights we had more teenagers in that gym than we really knew what to do with. Now, I loved playing basketball, and so I was pretty much there every week. But almost immediately, it became clear to me that the style of basketball and the brand of basketball that was being played at Open Gym was very different from what I was personally used to. First of all, everyone who played basketball at Open Gym talked trash a lot. We actually had to make some rules about cursing because most of these kids came from on church backgrounds. And while we were able to kind of limit the number of curse words that were flying around on a given night, we were never able to really eliminate the trash talk because it was clear for some of these kids, basketball and trash talk were so closely linked, you couldn't really separate the two. For me, as a sheltered white homeschool kid, this didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. I didn't really get it, but I wanted to play basketball, so I went with it. The second thing I noticed was that no one seemed that interested in playing defense at all. Everyone wanted to do sweet crossovers and break people's ankles, which they were really good at. But no one wanted to put that much effort into rebounding or hustling back to stop a fast break. It just wasn't a thing, which kind of was my thing. And so I didn't get it. I didn't understand it, but I wanted to play, so I put up with it. The third thing I really felt different to me was that no one ever really told me their real name. So when I would ask kids, hey, what's your name? They would say something like this. They would say, my name is Skills, or my name is Buckets, or my name is Handles. And of course, I mean, I knew these were nicknames, but I just didn't understand why, even after some of these kids I knew for years, they still would never tell me their real name. I just didn't understand it. But one day it dawned on me that most nights at Open Gym, I was the only white kid on the court. Most of these kids came from the low income housing project that was just a couple of blocks south of my house. So while they grew up very close to me, their experience in life was dramatically different than mine. The opportunities that they had been given or denied, the expectations that had been placed on their life, just the whole culture around them, the ways that they had been stereotyped, it was just so much different from mine, and as a result, their outlook on the world was very different than mine. I realized that Open Gym, for me, was actually a cross cultural experience. At Open Gym, I was the one who was different. I was the outsider. And that was why I was so confused and frustrated at the beginning. But thankfully, there was this guy named Swish who befriended me and kind of took me under his wing. I think he could see that I was confused and frustrated, and for whatever reason, he liked me and he decided to kind of teach me the ropes. He was a great guy and he treated me with respect and he helped me kind of learn how to play that brand of basketball, though I was never that great at it. And he would choose me to be on his team, even though I was never the best player out on the court. Now, he would still talk trash to me all the time, but somehow he did it in a way that I knew he loved me and I knew he respected me. Best of all, Swish would stand up for me. If I made a mistake, or I threw the ball away, or I took a bad shot, it was a very common experience for me to get yelled at and berated by my teammates. But if Swish thought someone was out of line, he would stand up for me. He would take my side. And I'll never forget that. It just made me feel so respected and so loved. Looking back, I'm just very grateful for Swish and what he did for me in my life. He helped me feel included in a place where I constantly felt like an outsider. He let me into this world and into his world, and he stood up for me when I was being mistreated. And he gave me the wonderful gift, eventually, of just feeling like one of the guys, feeling like I fit in, feeling like I belonged. Right now in my life, I want to be more like Swish. We live in a time in our country where racial tension is at an all time high, and people are responding in many different ways, some good and some bad. But personally, I want to be like Swish. I want to help those who have been mistreated and treated like outsiders in our country, and I want to help them to feel like they belong. I want to help them know that they belong. I want to be a person who stands up for those who are being mistreated, and I want to fight for equality and for justice in our nation. This is episode 4 of a series called Better on the Other Side, and my goal is to share some thoughts with you about how I long to grow and change during this unique time in our world. My prayer is that together we can learn some simple truths from Scripture that will help transform us from the inside out so that our new normal can actually be a better normal. Today I'd like to talk about how I long to be better at standing up against racial injustice in our world. On May 25th of this year, George Floyd was killed in yet another tragic experience of brutality directed towards people of color. Police brutality has been a thing that's been going on for years and years and years, and this was just the latest in a string of incidents that goes back, for as long as our country has existed. His murder sparked protests and riots all over the country, and right now people are crying out for justice. This brutality and the way that police are using force, especially towards people of color, it's just unacceptable. And it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. As a white man, I long to learn how to be better at standing up for my African American brothers and sisters. So with that in mind, I reached out to my friend Tyler St. Clair, who is a wise and godly pastor in the Detroit area. And he's also one of my dear friends. And recently he shared on Facebook 3 things that white Christians can do to come alongside and to stand up for people of color right now. I asked him if I could share those 3 things with you, and that's what I'd like to do today. Here are the 3 things that he said we can do. We can listen, we can lament, and we can lend our voice. They all start with an L, so great job, Tyler. We can listen, we can lament, and we can lend our voice. I want these 3 things to be true in my life, so let's just walk through them briefly. First, we can listen. Tyler encouraged me to assume our ignorance and lack of cultural understanding and to simply listen to people of color. We need to hear their stories, we need to believe their stories, and we need to take them seriously. In James 1:19 it says this, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." This is a time when we need to be quick to listen, especially those of us who come from the majority culture in our country. We need to listen honestly to the experiences of people who don't look like us, and then we need to take them at their word when they tell us about their experiences in life. Years ago, when I was working on my master's degree, I had to take a class called Diversity. And I remember I was not excited to take it. I didn't think it was going to be that interesting because I'm ashamed to admit, at that point in my life, I still believed a lie. I actually thought that racism was mostly a thing of the past. I thought it pretty much ended in the 60s and 70s with desegregation and affirmative action. And so I mostly assumed that it was kind of not something our country was dealing with anymore. Sure, I still heard stories of, crazy stuff happening down south or in other parts of the country, but somehow that always seemed so distant and unrelated to my life. Personally, I had never experienced any racism or injustice directed at me, so I just assumed it wasn't a big deal anymore. Of course, I was dead wrong. The professor of this diversity class was an African American man who was one of the smartest and most well spoken people I had ever met in my life. At the time, I think he had at least 2 doctorate degrees, and when he taught, he spoke with such a kindness, but also such a firmness and a severity that it just really impressed me. I quickly came to love this man, and I loved his class. It's really one of the most important college classes I've ever taken in my life. And I remember that as he shared stories from his own personal life and the life of his kids, I was both shocked and heartbroken at what I was hearing. Injustice and racism was just a part of his everyday life. He came to expect it at every turn, and somehow he had even learned to live with it. I remember it was like scales fell off my eyes during that class, and for the first time I could see how blind I had truly been. As a white man, I just never had to face racism, so I could kind of ignore it, and it just wasn't a part of my experience. So I could assume that it wasn't part of anyone's experience. For that, all I can say is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't understand quicker, and I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner. So here is my advice to my white brothers and sisters. When it comes to people of color, we need to assume that we don't understand what they have been through, and then we need to honestly listen to their story. And if they are kind enough to share their experience with us, we need to believe what they tell us, and we need to sympathize with them and trust that what they're telling us is true. I believe that if we do this, we will find our hearts breaking right along with theirs, and we will understand that systemic racism is a real thing in our society and that it needs to come to an end. So the question is, will you take time to truly listen? Will I take time to truly listen? And this brings us to our second point, and that is lament. Tyler encouraged us to voluntarily enter the mourning of people of color and to show Christ's compassion for them rather than arguing the situation's validity or trying to downplay the problem. In Romans 12:15 and 16, it says this: "Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another." Right now, our nation is full of people who are weeping and who are in distress and who are in despair. They are completely heartbroken. They feel helpless. They feel unseen. They feel like outsiders. They feel like their lives are of less value than the lives of white men and women. And they have a lot of good reasons and facts from history that support the way that they're feeling. It's time for us to weep with those who are weeping. Not too long ago, I was in my basement in my makeshift workout gym, and I was doing a workout, and it was just after I had heard the news about the murder of George Floyd. And I remember I was completely devastated. There were also, riots taking place in my hometown of Minneapolis, which also was just disturbing to me. And I remember I was listening to Spotify at the time, and a Coldplay song came on. And they have this song called "Trouble in the Town." It's a song about racial injustice, and right in the middle of the song, they have a recording of a police officer who's harassing a black man in Philadelphia in 2013. It's very disturbing. It's so hard to listen to. So when I heard that part of the song start playing, I actually fell to my knees and I just started weeping. Because this is something that should never ever happen. And yet it happens over and over and over again. And so I wept. Friends, this is a time for us to cry. It's a time for tears. It's a time for us to weep with those who weep. Will you join me in lament? Finally, the third thing I want to do is lend my voice. Tyler said that as a member of the majority class, we can leverage our influence to empower people of color to speak loud and clear when injustice happens. And really, we need to empower people of color to speak no matter what time it is, no matter what's going on in our world. Just like Swoosh helped me and stood up for me when I was an outsider, it's time for me to stand up for those around me who are being mistreated. In Isaiah 1:17, we are told this: learn to do good, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphan, fight for the rights of the widows. We are called to be people who seek justice and help the oppressed. I think it's an undeniable fact that people of color in our country have been oppressed and denied justice over and over again. And I want to use my voice to help stand up for them. I want to speak out against injustice and make it clear that we will not stand for this anymore. Many of us have been silent for far too long, and it's time for us to speak out and take action. Now, honestly, I don't know all of what this is going to look like in my life right now, but I'm in the process of figuring that out. And even this video is one small step in me lending my voice to my brothers and sisters of colors. It's one small way for me to say, I see you, I love you, and I'm with you. Tyler St. Clair encouraged me to listen, to lament, and to lend my voice, and that's what I long to do. But I want to add just one thing to the list, and thankfully it also starts with an L. It's the word love. Right now it's clearly a time for action, but as Christians, every step of the way, we need to move forward in love. Jesus once said this of his followers. He said, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Love is supposed to be the calling card of Christianity. It's supposed to be the thing that makes us shine and stand out and be different from the world around us. And Jesus said that this is a love that extends not only to our friends, but also to our enemies. Not only to those who look like us, but also those who don't look like us. Not only the people that we love, but even to the people we don't like. Jesus is calling us to love others the way that he loved us. And how did he love us? Well, he gave his life for us when we were outsiders so that we could be welcomed into the family of God. In Philippians chapter 2, it tells us that Jesus gave up the privilege of being equal with God, and then he lowered himself to the point of a servant. And then he died the death of a slave so that we could become children of the one true King. That's the kind of love that God has for us. And we are called to love others the way that Jesus loved us. So let me just remind you what the love of Jesus looks like. The Apostle Paul told us clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. He said this: love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. The love that God has called us to is an others first love. It's a self-sacrificial love. It's a love that puts the rights of others in front of our own rights and our own wants and our own desires. And this is the love that should be present everywhere we go as Christians. It should be present when we're speaking to someone face to face, or when we're texting somebody, or when we're posting something on the internet. As Christians, everything that we do should be marked by a self-sacrificial, others-first type of love. So here's what I want to do. I want to listen, I want to lament, and I want to lend my voice to my brothers and sisters of color. And I want to do all of this in love, because love is what marks us apart as followers of Jesus. This is what I long to do, and I hope you will join me, because this is one way that I think we can all be better on the other side. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope this was helpful, and if so, feel free to share it however you'd like, and also be on the lookout for another episode coming soon. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you.